I'm Kyle. I'm here to review the 15-30mm Tamron lens. It's an ultra wide angle for Canon, and we're going to compare it to the 16-35mm Canon F2.8 lens as well. Chris is away on vacation, so I'm here to actually do this because I'm a real photographer. So I haven't seen this before, and the first thing that I noticed is that it's quite heavy and huge. When I looked at the front, I thought, oh my god, this thing looks amazing. It's really gorgeous. It has this hood built into it. This is the first stabilized f2.8 ultra wide angle lens. Kind of explains why it's so huge. They have to fit a lot of components into this package. It seems pretty impressive and has a nice feel to it. It feels really solid. So the initial idea here that we were trying to get is we want to express the devastation from the 2013 floods that Alberta experienced. It changed the landscape, and in here we got these trees entirely ripped apart and strewn through the forest. Some of the larger trees are still standing. So this will actually be a good test of the contrast in high contrast situations with this lens. So we were shooting with this lens and having a pretty good time, but the weather came in. It got pretty rainy, and I'm not worried about this lens getting wet because it is weather sealed. And so is the 5D Mark III, but I don't really believe it. I don't trust it. I've killed a 5D Mark II, I've killed a 7D. I'm pretty good at murdering these cameras with pretty bad weather. So we decided we're going to shoot tomorrow. I really liked what we had, and maybe we'll get something interesting. Hey, so we're back in Canmore after a couple days of shooting, and I've been playing with this lens and it feels quite natural. So with a wide angle lens, I'm generally shooting landscape images. So I'm using really closed in apertures, f16, f14, and I've noticed that these images are quite sharp, just as sharp as the other lenses that I use, the Canon lenses. What I'm going to try is I'm going to shoot more f2.8 photos as well to see what the performance is with that. So it's pretty important that you have a fairly close minimum focusing distance with a wide angle lens, because everything looks so far away in a wide angle lens. You actually have to get the camera and the lens very close to your subject. And especially for macros, people don't even think about using these for macros, but you can get some pretty interesting shots. So this is my minimum focusing distance here. I'm at 20 mils here, and that's really darn close. And it's good, I really like that. Shooting up at flowers is a nice way to get a unique image. So it looks like we've got enough photos, so we're going to go inside and download these photos and take a look. So I've had a chance to look at these files, and at first I thought I was going to show you all the raw files. But once I started editing them, I knew that I could actually see the huge differences after they're processed. And the more heavily processed, the more aberrations I could see. So I did a few comparisons, and here we got Mitch here, he's posing for us. This is almost the perfect image that I was looking for. I love shooting into the sun. A lot of my most favorite photos have a lot of these awesome stars of a sun in them. You shoot at f16, the blades get you this nice little star in the sun, and of course modern SLRs have a huge dynamic range. You can shoot into the sun and there's nothing wrong with it. You can still get some details. I love to do this, and this is probably the perfect demo for this lens. And I shot the same photo in the Canon 16-35 lens as I did with the Tamron 15-30 lens. When I'm flipping between the two images, you can see the passage of time. The most obvious thing that I see is a number of points in the star, in the sun. You see a lot more points in the Tamron, which basically means there's more aperture blades in the lens that give you that nice feel. I like that. The more points, the better. And the lens flare is a little bit out of control in the Canon. It's a little bit more held in with the Tamron. Chromatic aberration seems to be about the same. This is the 5D Mark III, so we have 22 megapixels in this image. So if I zoom in the corner, you can see on the left hand side we have our Tamron, and on the right hand side we have the Canon. The Canon's a little bit brighter but softer, especially on the edges. It seems to be almost the same sharpness level through and through with the Tamron. they seem to match up when they're in the middle. So I think that this lens is a product of a little bit of foresight on Tamron's part. I think Tamron realized that we're coming out with higher and higher resolution cameras. The lenses haven't caught up. I was excited for the new 5D, but I knew that I'd have to buy new lenses for it. And this lens actually seems designed for the future generations. So we tried another comparison at f2.8. I'm trying to compare them, and I'm not really noticing a huge difference. The bokeh is about the same. The way that the bokeh changes shape towards the edge of the images is mostly the same. I wasn't exact on my execution of getting both of these images exactly the same. But I found mostly the sharpness in the middle seems to be about the same. I was happy with this. This is where we really started to notice the difference in light values with this. That the Tamron is a little bit darker than the other lens. I'm not really upset about that. It's no big deal that this lens seems to be a little bit darker. Because there's actually more things in this lens. It's got image stabilizer. There should be more glass. There should be less light transmission. That's not a huge deal. But this is where we noticed it the most. If I switch between the two, you'll notice a pretty dramatic difference between the one and the other. And the brighter one, with less contrast, is the Canon. And the little bit sharper and darker one is going to be from the Tamron. So I had a lot of fun with this lens. So in summary, I would say that yes, it's a little bit heavier. I'll forgive it for being a little bit heavier. It's not a huge deal. The image stabilization is really nice. I like having it, especially because that makes this lens future-proof. You can tell that Tamron was thinking about the future. They're thinking about high-resolution cameras because this is a high-resolution lens for sure. At the same time, it helps compensate for those problems that you get, which is major motion blur from barely any movement. Because at 50 megapixels, you're going to notice a huge amount of motion blur at the high-resolution levels. So they really, you can tell that they must have sat down and said, we need to make a lens for the future because they're coming out with these new cameras. People's needs are different. And it's interesting because these older lenses are obsolete. And I might be able to try to sell my 16-35 from Canon, but I'm not going to get a lot for it. It's had a lot of use, and it doesn't work for the newer modern cameras as well with resolution. I'm shocked that Tamron has a better lens than Canon because back in the day, they never used to be that good. So I'm pretty impressed with this lens. The only downside, yeah, I would say would be size and not being able to use a filter on there. Not the kind of filter that you would screw on. I like my screw-on ND filters. I don't like to use those big contraptions where you slide in all the ND filters. So it's a pretty interesting lens, and I think it's actually worth a look if you're interested.